Well, welcome to the July 29, 2022 meeting of the Tennessee Public Charter School Commission. I'd like to thank you all for your attendance at our meeting this morning. Also, I'd like to thank the Tennessee General Assembly for allowing us to meet here at the Cordell Hull building. Commissioners, please make sure your mic is on before you speak. And Chase, would you call the roll?
Commissioner Hanson.
Present.
Is present. Commissioner Levine.
Present.
Is present. Commissioner Patterson.
Present.
Is present. Commissioner Richards.
Present.
Is present. Commissioner Smith.
Present.
Is present. Commissioner Tucker.
Here.
Is present. Commissioner Woodson.
Here.
Is present. Chairman Griscom.
Here.
Is present. Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we vote to approve the commission's agenda, I want the record to reflect that Commissioner Sisnett has been excused from the meeting today. We have a lot of items on the agenda requiring action. First, we'll hear updates from the School Performance and Accountability Committee. The second item on our agenda is the Business Operations Committee report that will provide budget updates for the commission. Next, we will vote on commission and LEA policy changes during the Rules, Policy, and Government Committee report. After our committee reports are concluded, we'll move to reports from staff. We will start with a district-wide special populations update from the executive director, and then we will receive an update on our new START appeal process for the fall. We'll also hear updates regarding the legislative session that was recently concluded and the commission's strategic plan before concluding with an update from our executive director. And at that point, she will also introduce to us new staff members who've joined us since we were last together. Are there any questions or comments regarding the agenda? Seeing none, can I get a motion to approve?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, noes. Ayes have it. Thank you. The minutes of the meetings held on April 1st and June 28th have been provided. Do any commissioners have edits to make regarding the prior minutes before we proceed?
Motion to approve.
Second. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. In accordance with Commission Policy 1.200, we've reserved time for up to 30 minutes of public comment. Chase, can you please introduce any individual who've registered for public comment or any statements you may have received?
Yes, sir. This is from Jaquel Rogers with Green Dot Public Schools. Dear Commission members, Green Dot Public Schools, Tennessee is honored to work with the Tennessee Charter Commission and operate Bluff City High School. We are an organization invested in how to grow students academically, socially, and emotionally, but also an organization that's reflective in those practices for our own growth. We believe in celebrating our successes and taking ownership of our areas of growth. The 2021-22 school year brought a significant number of challenges that our organization is working to aggressively correct for the next year. We have brought in a new administrative team led by Chad Everett. Bluff City will be fully staffed and is on track to meet student enrollment. Green Dot Public Schools is continuing to be reflective of the metrics that have not been met and seeking ways to address them. Bluff City High School has been faced with rising rates of chronic absenteeism since the onset of the pandemic. These numbers worsened last year as students returned to school but were continuously absent due to COVID-related illness, family illness, and a myriad of other reasons, documented and undocumented. COVID-19 pandemic had an impact on our students far greater than we ever imagined. Chronic absenteeism is difficult to measure and compare nationally because schools do not report data in the same way. However, we know chronic absenteeism is an issue throughout Tennessee and Shelby County. A study conducted by McKinsey & Company states in 2021-22 alone, 72% of high-poverty schools across the nation saw a higher rate of chronic absenteeism than in years prior to the pandemic. That same study reported that roughly 65% of high school teachers had at least one student during the 2020-2021 school year who was enrolled but never showed up for class. Bluff City shares a similar story. We have hired additional staff to support attendance and SEL. These teams will make calls, home visits, provide resources, and combat any barrier preventing students from being in school daily. We will continue working on our students' academic growth and development. We did not meet the expectations set by the Tennessee Charter Center framework, but we are building capacity in our school leaders to provide academic coaching for teachers, making sure they are delivering bell-to-bell instruction to students daily. We did not meet the proficiency rates set by the Commission, but in honesty, very few schools in the state can meet the metrics they've set, especially those in similar subgroups served by Green Dot Public Schools. We are excited the Commission will be adding growth as a measure of success to the framework. This gives operators who partner with underserved communities a fighting chance to thrive under the Commission's authorization.
Are there any other requests, Chase, for comments during this time?
We had Bob Nardo signed up for public comment, but he was not able to be here today.
I did get a text that requested him to read the email into the record, and it's up to the chair if you would like to have that email read or not.
I would suggest that we have it put into our record, if he submitted it, and we'll put it in so that it's available as part of the record of this meeting. Okay, thank you. Commissioners, before we move into the rest of the agenda, I would like to take a point of personal privilege this morning as the chair to share a statement, if you all do not mind. Almost 3 years ago, I, along with most current commissioners, were appointed by Governor Bill Lee to serve on the state's new Public Charter School Commission. Governor Lee put forward the concept of a Public Charter School Commission early in 2019, and the Tennessee General Assembly passed the legislation that created this panel and confirmed us as members. While I serve as chair of the commission, I'm speaking as a commissioner from Chattanooga to share a few thoughts on why we exist, what we strive to achieve for students and parents in Tennessee, and why charter schools are another public school option for a quality education. I'm a product of Tennessee's public schools, from the first grade to receiving a bachelor's degree from the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Others can decide whether I'm a good representative of public education in this state at a later time. I had great teachers who made me work hard, taught me the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic, and helped shape me as a person to be successful in life. And for that, I say thank you. There's no question that the number one factor for educational success is a quality teacher. Teachers are professionals in a field that prepares all students for life, a career, and as contributors to the public good. Public school teachers, including those in public charter schools, are certified to teach. With the majority of our state's educated workforce coming from public schools, they do make a difference. As I prepared these remarks, I remembered lessons learned from my mentor, the late Senator Howard Baker. As a lifelong advocate of civility, he felt that all points of view should be heard, that the other person should have the opportunity to express an opinion, and the same should apply to other opinions as well. From those discussions, informed decisions will result. Over the past few weeks, public school choice has been part of the public dialogue. Today, I have a better appreciation for those who have labored in the public charter school sector for decades in our state, and how the exclusion of information is designed to temper public opinion. Let me be clear. Charter schools are public schools. As a commission, our charge is to be nationally recognized as a top-tier quality authorizer in a state where a strong portfolio of public charter schools exist. In Chattanooga, we have high-quality charter schools that work well with the Hamilton County Department of Education. I also realize, like the criticism some 2 decades earlier of magnet schools, that options and change are not easy to accept for those who want to maintain the status quo. Are there public charter schools under the direction of the Charter Commission? Yes. We are structured like a school district, accountable to the same standards as other school districts in Tennessee's 95 counties, reviewed by the State Board of Education and several legislative committees. As the still newly formed State Public Charter School Commission, we're setting a bar for quality performance for Tennessee's charter schools based on state standards so every student has the opportunity to succeed. As a commission, the lens that we use is based on high performance. Our schools are rigorously evaluated, encouraged, and visited to be sure they comply with state law and that they are moving all students on a path of educational excellence. Public charter schools are an option for students. Education reform, which has taken different pathways over time, starts from a foundation and recognition that taxpayers in Tennessee are the source of funds for most of our students. Most will attend public, taxpayer-funded schools, and Tennessee charter schools are one of the pathways providing a quality public education. Thank you. With that, we are now ready to hear a report from our School Performance and Accountability Committee. I'd like to recognize Commissioner Chris Richards.
Thank you, Chairman. At the School Performance and Accountability Committee, the committee heard several key updates from staff on the authorizing and district functions of the Commission. The committee discussed proposed updates to the Commission's school performance framework, Bluff City's interim review, updates regarding new schools opening this upcoming school year, and updates on school security for our portfolio. First, I'd like to recognize Beth Figueroa and Maggie Lund to provide the committee's report and ask that they begin with the overview of the school performance framework update. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Richards. I'm Maggie Lund. The Commission had a robust discussion during the School Performance and Accountability Committee yesterday regarding the school performance framework. The Commission recognizes the importance of having a long-withstanding framework that holds our schools accountable at a high performance standard while also acknowledging the nuance in serving special populations that fall outside the resident district norm and average. Commissioners displayed support for the new mission-specific indicator, along with a new comparison proposal split between resident district and subgroup comparison. Commissioner Tucker brought up a valid question regarding data suppression at the N size of 30, which staff will continue to examine before final read, as to what other options we may have in examining this data at a smaller N size versus what we can report publicly within the annual report. Additionally, there was robust discussion regarding catching bad actors within the framework or any counseling out of kids. Commissioner Sisnet's addition to the framework within the organizational performance section for student attrition by subgroup addresses this concern, and Commission staff will continue to fine-tune this indicator to examine what is possible in terms of tracking students who move out of state or out of district. Additionally, commissioners expressed understanding and support for alignment with the TDOE accountability model within the framework in regards to the letter grade calculation. There was robust discussion regarding the TVOS indicator, which holds 10% of the framework currently in this proposal. TVOS is a statistical comparison of students' performance in regards to their peers. Commissioners floated the idea of having a meet standard as a TVOS 3, representing annual typical growth, but potentially awarding what we could consider as bonus points or additional weight in the framework for schools that exceed that statistical growth. Commission staff will consider this idea and examine ways that this can be included within the framework going forward ahead of final read in October. Again, thank you, commissioners, for your insight and feedback. We're excited to begin this process of running our school's data through this framework and finalizing ahead of the October meeting. And we're also thankful to all of our stakeholders and school operators throughout this process. We've had a really robust process, and we have really taken a very close look at this, and I'm very grateful for your candor and your insights yesterday. Thank you. Next, the School Performance and Accountability Committee discussed Bluff City High School being placed on probation as a Tier 3 violation per the Commission's Intervention Policy 3.400. Per the interim report, Bluff City is not on track for renewal in some key areas, including academic performance, chronic absenteeism, enrollment, and suspension rate. Commission staff has met with Bluff City leadership regarding the development of a plan of correction, which is due to the Commission on September 1st. Commissioner Richards and Commissioner Smith expressed concerns regarding Bluff City's performance, particularly with their chronic absenteeism rate, and noted Bluff City has important and high-stakes road ahead of them as they continue to improve in alignment with the goals that they have outlined. Finally, Commission staff provided an update to commissioners regarding pre-opening updates for both New Start schools and our ASD transition schools. Cornerstone Prep School, our New Start school in Memphis, is ready to open its doors in August and is welcoming 30 new kindergartners. Rocket Ship Dream Community Prep, our New Start school in Nashville, has hit construction delays and is working closely with Commission staff on contingency plans for opening in August. They will welcome approximately 250 new students, or 285 is the latest number, grades K through 4. Additionally, Lester Prep, Cornerstone Prep, Denver, and Libertas School of Memphis have successfully transitioned to the commission, and they will finalize this process in August. The commission now has 9 schools within our portfolio for the 22-23 school year. We had conversations of scaling, which is very exciting. And 2 schools are already in the pipeline for the 23-24 school year, which is KIPP Antioch Collegiate Prep High School and Rutherford Collegiate Prep. Thank you.
Maggie, thank you. Let me thank most commissioners who were able to come and be part of our school performance update hearing yesterday. I thought it was very beneficial because that's an important part of what we're doing. So Commissioner Richards, let me ask you, do you have any comments before I call for a vote on one of the items?
No, sir.
So on the Bluff City recommendation for a 1-year probationary period, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
I've got the motion is by Commissioner Richards, the second is by Commissioner Smith. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Now we are ready to have a discussion on school safety.
Great. I'm happy to provide this discussion on school safety. As we had some staff yesterday come forward and go through operational plans and items that we have in place to ensure school safety per the request of Commissioner Richards. And so we outlined those items to commission staff and answered any questions that they may have.
Commissioner Richards.
Thank you so much. The important work of this committee has been aided by Commissioner Cisnet, who is not here today, but spent countless hours working on the school performance framework. Just want to recognize his efforts for the record. He provides a tremendous amount of practical hands-on knowledge in this area, which we found very beneficial. I also want to recognize Beth and Maggie for the tremendous work they've done. This is really hard work. And we're trying to achieve a standard that not only will set a clear framework for our schools, but also could be used by other charter LEAs that are recognizing or will be supervising charters as we go forward as to something they might want to adopt. So thank you so much for your work. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioners. Let me also thank you for your attention to the issue of security and safety in our schools. I think when we see a lot of things that are happening today, appreciate the attention that staff is giving to this and working with our schools to make sure that they are in compliance, that they focus on this, and that it becomes part of what I call an everyday practice in our schools. So thank you for that. We'll now move to the second agenda item, which is the report of the Business Operations Committee. I'd like to recognize Committee Chair, Commissioner Hanson, to introduce these items.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Business Operation Committee discussed the Commission's budget to actuals for fiscal year 2022 and received an update to the fiscal year 2023 budget. The committee also considered the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024 and voted to approve the meeting dates for 2023 and an interagency agreement between the Commission and the Tennessee Language Center. I'd like to recognize Melanie Harrell, who will give the report for the committee, please.
Thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Our Executive Director, Tess Stovall, provided a number of operational updates for the committee around staffing, our current procurement activities, and our office space. The abbreviated version is we'll get there eventually to the 8th floor at some point. We have 2 items that were considered by the committee for action. The first is our interagency agreement with the Tennessee Language Center. We know that we have growing interpretation needs across our district. We are seeing growing and diverse student populations, and so we wanted to make sure that we have the appropriate services available for us and our families, as well as making sure that we can get our policies and procedures and all important documents translated. So this was brought to the committee because it has a maximum liability of $40,000, again, recognizing that this is a growing need. And so in accordance with our commission procedures 1000 procurement, any contract above $25,000 requires a review by the Business Operations Committee and a positive recommendation to the full commission prior to executing the agreement. And so that agreement is before you today. Additionally, we also discussed the 2023 commission meeting dates. These meetings are required by commission policy to be set by the commission by October 15th of the year preceding that calendar year. So these meeting dates have been given to you in your materials, and so staff have proposed both regular and a couple of special called meeting dates for 2023, which are based on your responses to the surveys about your availability. So those meeting dates also required a review by the Business Operations Committee and a positive recommendation to the full committee.
Commissioner Hanson, do you have any comments you would like to make before we put a couple of votes up?
Just thanks to Melanie for all the hard work with the team.
So there's a motion to approve the proposed meeting dates for 2023. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Do I have a second? Second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Thank you. We also need a motion to approve the interagency agreement between the Commission and the Tennessee Language Center. Do I have a motion?
So motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I
yes,
just have one,
Commissioner-
this
yes,
was a committee
Mr.
discussion that I actually didn't butt into yesterday, so I just wanted to say I'm really happy to see that we're doing this. I think this will help engage families that don't feel empowered at this point, so just bravo for the commission staff for being proactive about this and making this connection.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker. Any other comments? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. And now I think we've got one other item, which is our FY22 budget to actuals, correct?
And our FY23 and FY24 budget. So we
There you
get all
go.
the numbers today.
Thank you. Okay.
So thank you so much, Chair Grissom. We also did provide an update on our FY22 budget to actuals yesterday to the committee. These reflect our current spending and revenue drawdown through June 30th of this year. However, agency budgets have not yet gone through the final close process, so we will need to bring kind of a final closed set of actuals at the end our October meeting. So one of the key things that we wanted to highlight is that we do still have some final reimbursements for things like grant pass-through funds and BEP dollars that are forecasted and that will be going out to schools. We also did note that we have our BEP expenditures exceed that revenue due to the final fiscal year true-up for FY21, and discussed why this is very important that we budget with a surplus in mind, that these numbers are ever shifting, and that these revenue projections can be a little bit tricky and require a late true-up at the end of the year. So we are still projecting an overall surplus for FY22, and again, we'll be sure to present the final closed actuals at our next meeting. For our FY23 budget update, as we all know, we are scaling, so we are anticipated to grow to about 3,800 students next year from about 1,800 this year. We currently are budgeting with a projected surplus of $700,000, which is about 30% of our expected revenue excluding pass-throughs. So we know that that is a conservative budget, and discussed yesterday in the committee meeting about given the uncertainty around BEP amounts, ever-changing projections, and the possibility of enrollment variance, we do think it's important to make sure that we conservatively budget our funds at the beginning of the year. We did also update some of our professional services line items to reference the procurement activities presented in the executive director's report, and we also anticipate seeking hopefully 2 rather small dollar contracts for some federal programming support to provide additional support to our schools in serving special populations and in federal program implementation. Finally, we also presented the preliminary FY24 budget. It was already time to do that. We will be submitting our budget request to Finance and Administration in September, so it'll be here before we know it. One thing I did want to highlight for the full commission is that our current revenue and authorizer fee assumptions that were included in that budget were based on the current estimated BEP rate. We, of course, know that there will be a lot coming down the pipeline with TISA and TISA implementation and rulemaking this year. But what we look at with TISA is considering this hopefully a floor. It should be a floor in terms of our revenue assumptions, and so we base that and we'll be making updates to these estimates once we get more projections around TISA and those TISA rules are finalized. So with that, the only other thing that I would note is that we know that there has been an expectation set for us by the General Assembly that we are keeping an eye on our financials to make sure that we are moving toward being more sustainable on the authorizer fee alone. And we know that's important as we plan for our scaling and our growth as a district. Finally, we are watching this appeals cycle closely, as I know you all are as well. And so currently for FY24, we have not made any changes in the budget to our staffing assumptions. However, we know after we evaluate this appeal cycle and get a better sense of what our portfolio will look like, we may request 1 to 3 additional positions from the General Assembly for FY24. And we will be sure to update everyone on that request during our October meeting.
Commissioner Hanson, let me turn to you if there are any comments from the committee.
No, sir.
Seeing none, do I have a motion to approve?
So motion.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Thank you, Melanie. So next on our agenda is a report from the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee. Commissioner Patterson, I'd like to recognize you to provide the report from the committee meeting yesterday.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee received an update on the application and rubric that will be used for schools applying from the Achievement School District and voted on updated commission and LEA policies on first and final reading. I'd like to recognize our General Counsel, Ashley Thomas, to update the commission on the first set of the policy updates.
Thank you, Commissioner. So the first policy that I want to talk to the Commission about is Commission Policy 1.100. I proposed with the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee yesterday a change to this policy that includes a term speaking to Commission attendance. And to begin that conversation, this is why I'm proposing that for consideration. So Tennessee law requires the Commission to meet at least quarterly with the majority of members entitled to vote to establish a quorum. So there must be 5 members present to vote on commission business. Because of the pandemic, the commission held the majority of their meetings in 2020 and 2021 virtually, and we were operating under Governor Lee's executive orders, the latest of which was Executive Order 78. That order expired April 28th of 2021, and without a similar order in place, as a state agency, we must schedule and conduct our meetings in accordance with the open meetings law. Under that law, participation of members by electronic means is only permissible if the commission deems a necessity. So with that as background, I'm putting forth this policy to introduce language that explains the absences of commission members, if there are any, what would be considered excused for our regularly scheduled meetings. So in accordance with state law, commission members are prohibited from missing more than half of any of our regularly scheduled meetings without cause. In this policy, I've drafted language for an excused absence to include illness, family emergency, jury duty, religious holidays, and I've also included a caveat for unforeseen extenuating circumstances. This policy would require the commission member to notify the executive director seeking to be excused from one of our meetings within 14 days of that meeting. The executive director would then consult with the chair to determine if the absence was excused. The policy also includes steps to be taken if a member is found to be in violation of this policy. For purposes of the conversation, I also separated out and included language for our special called meetings, and the difference there would be that we would need a 7-day advance notice if you're going to miss that, and that is to preserve quorum for those special called meetings because that would be emergency business. And so I'll stop here for any additional conversation.
Commissioner Patterson, any comments?
No further comments, other than to say, we spent a lot of time thinking about this. One thing I just want to note for folks, we knew that we could not capture every circumstance, and so we came down to illness, family emergencies, et cetera, but we did want to make sure that there was some room for grace in the context of the other unforeseen extenuating obligations. So just wanted to make that note, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Let me make other commissioners aware. I've asked Commissioner Patterson to consider this and for his committee to consider it. because coming out of COVID, Ashley, as you noted, we met, once or twice, and then when into COVID, we didn't meet again. And it was important to, when we came back and the executive orders you said went away, that we really look at this and figure out that for people to see us in person, to be here, to have a quorum so we could function. Also, there will be a chair coming behind me, so I hope that some of the things right now are making suggestions and things that hopefully help whoever is next in this seat to be able to conduct orderly work of this commission. So I just wanted to share with everybody, this is one of the things I did ask Commissioner Patterson to look at and to sort of have something here that provides a little more direction in terms of attendance and what type of things would be excused. So I just wanted to put that into the record.
You make the assumption, Mr. Chair, that this board would vote to not require you to continue as chair.
That is correct. Yes, I do. You would have to rule change. So having said, but Commissioner Patterson, I wanted to go on the record with other commissioners. They knew that I'd asked you and your committee to look at this. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Ashley?
The second policy on first reading is Commission Policy 3.700, which is the School Performance Framework. As Maggie indicated earlier, the School Performance and Accountability Committee had a robust discussion yesterday regarding that particular policy. I believe they've taken all of your suggestions into consideration, and we will bring it back for final reading in October. But because it was a part of a policy, it is being presented out for vote with this committee report.
Commissioner Patterson, any comments?
No. My light is flashing green.
Oh.
No further comment from me.
Thank you. So we're ready for a vote on commission policies 1.300, 2.000, 2.100. Oh, did I miss?
Around 3,700.
Oh, how did I miss that one? Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Is that the one we just did?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I think we're just looking to review or to approve 3.700.
On
Okay.
first reading.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for, any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Oh, no, ayes have. Your chair apologizes. Okay. What's next?
Okay, so the next policy will be on final reading would be the policies 1.300, 2.000, 2.100, 2.200, 2.300, 3.200, 3.500, and 3.600. I'm going to separate out 3.9 because there was some changes. But these policies had no changes from first reading in April. Just to recap for the commission, these policies govern our appeals process. We are extending the time that parties have to submit their documentation from 5 calendar days to 7 calendar days. And we also updated the policy to indicate that capacity interviews would be conducted virtually. And this is just reflective of our first appeal cycle, and we saw where efficiencies could be sort of shored up, and so we wanted to change those policies in that way.
Commissioner Patterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I made this comment in our committee, and I just wanted the listening public to know again, and I wanted to reiterate. While we are about to approve all of these policies relatively quickly, our committee and the staff has taken an enormous amount of time to go through each of these policies. In particular, my fellow commissioners on the Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee. So while we are just reading these exhaustive numbers, I do want folks to know that we have reviewed the policies themselves, and we feel very confident in bringing this recommendation to the full board.
So now we're ready to vote on commission policies 1.300, 2.000, 2.100, 2.200, 2.300, 3.200, 3.500, 3.600, and 3.900. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
But we're not voting on 3.900, correct?
Right, there are changes to that one.
So, motion to approve 1.3, 2.0, 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 3.2, 3.5, and 3.6.
Right.
Second, or on final reading,
Yes.
show off. So moved.
Any other?
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I understood which ones. Could you read off those?
Thank you.
No, Alan, you're going to challenge me because you're going to see that my script really didn't work, okay? It didn't work on the last one, so that's okay. I will know to be a little more careful when I'm looking at all these numbers next time. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. The best one is there's no numbers in the next one, I think, Terrence, if I look at it. The Rules, Policy, and Governance Committee also voted on an update for the Commission's rule around charter school appeals. I'll recognize Ashley again for an overview on this one. Yes.
Sorry, I think we need to go back and actually hear 3.9 on final reading, make a motion and approve it. We haven't done that yet.
There were updated changes from first reading.
So it is still up to be approved
Right,
today.
yes.
Okay. Thank you
Okay.
for that. So with that, would you talk about Rule 3.900?
That's right.
Okay, so this policy, again, is up for final reading. It was first presented to the commission in April. This would govern any petitions that we receive for schools that we authorize, the commission authorizes, I'm sorry. And so after that discussion in April, we went back and made some changes. Again, this highlights that the policy is a supplement to and not a substitute for the requirements that are in the TDOE's application and the commission rule. I have reformatted the matrix of the supporting documentation that's required for any amendment petition that we received. And I also included language that they have 7 days to provide that documentation, as well as preserve the right for the commission to ask for any additional information.
Thank you. Commissioner Patterson,
No further comment.
do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Now, we are moving to the item that talks about charter school appeals, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just trying to see, this has totally been off what I was given, so thank you.
Absolutely.
Ashley, yes.
So again, this is for final reading for the charter appeals rules. Again, this proposed change is to clarify that the parties have seven calendar days to submit any requested documentation in relation to an appeal. Also clarifies that capacity interviews will be conducted virtually. Upon a positive vote by the commission, I would file these rules with the Secretary of State. And because these are final reading rules, I would need a roll call vote on this particular item.
Commissioner Patterson,
No further comment. I'd like to make a motion to approve.
is there a second? Second. All those in favor say aye.
She's going to do a roll call.
Okay. Thank you. I will spend a little more time working on this.
That may be my fault, Mr. Chair.
No, it's
but
not
this
your
will
fault.
require-
I mean, this is not the way this ought to run, but call the roll, Chase.
Commissioner Hanson? Aye. Votes aye. Commissioner Levine? Aye. Votes aye. Commissioner Patterson? Aye. Votes aye. Commissioner Richards?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Smith? Aye. Votes aye. Commissioner Tucker?
Aye.
Votes aye. Commissioner Woodson?
Aye.
Votes aye. Chairman Griscom?
Aye.
Votes aye. Mr. Chairman, the motion is approved.
Thank you. Commissioner Patterson, since I don't trust what I've got, let me ask you, is there another item from your committee?
Yes, I think we have.
The LEA policy?
We have the LEA policies
you, 'cause-
updates on first
okay.
and final reading.
Got,
That's
thank you much. Ashley, would you like to share that?
Yes, sir. So the LEA policies up before the commission are on first and final reading. Chase will be providing an update to the legislative updates that preceded these changes. I'll go through them really quickly. The LEA policies that we are putting up for first and final reading are LEA Policy 1800, which reflects a change that allows for an LEA to permit 2 virtual learning days. LEA Policy 4212, which introduces language that requires schools to conduct 2 remote learning drills. LEA Policy 4406 introduces language regarding school internet safety policies. LEA Policy 4605 clarifies enrollment for high school students that may graduate early. We updated LEA Policy 5118, which removes the statement that the director of schools would be responsible for conducting training related to background information, and we're leaving that to the responsibility of the school leader. LEA Policy 6313 contains updates to the student discipline policy, including permitting a teacher to confiscate cell phones if the phone is disruptive to the class or student. LEA Policy 6409 is updated to include language to require schools to submit contact information for its child abuse coordinator to the Department of Children's Services. And finally, LEA Policy 6500 introduces the requirement of an annual behavior intervention training program. In consultation with the LEA team, we've updated this policy to also reflect requirements of an IEP team meeting after the use of restraint in certain enumerated situations. I have flagged LEA Policy 6500 for additional research based on our conversation with the committee yesterday to try and create a more comprehensive effort on our oversight for the schools in our portfolio.
So that means we take it off the list for approval? No. We still can, Commissioner Patterson?
Yes, so yeah, thank you for asking that question, Mr. Chairman. So we are going to recommend approving the policy as it is currently recommended, but we are going to take another look as we continue to kind of further improve on an ongoing basis. But we are comfortable with the policy as it is today.
Thank you. Commissioner Tucker?
That's
Yes, just to clarify, or to I don't know, continue on that, on the restraint and isolation, I just want to say what I said yesterday. I want to thank the staff for going beyond what the state law requires already in our policy and requiring a behavior intervention plan in certain circumstances for when students are restrained. And I'm thankful that you're interested in looking at a more student-centered, holistic approach to restraint and isolation for our district. So I appreciate that. But yes, absolutely, we need to have the policy in place. We need to be in compliance with state law and add those additional protections that the staff already added. So thank you.
So are there any other questions? If not, we're getting ready to vote on LEA policies 1800, 4212, 4406, 4605, 5118, 6304, 6312, 6409, and 6500 on first and final reading. Do I have a motion?
so moved.
Do I have a second? Thank you. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. Thank you. Ashley, thank you for your work, and Terrence, let me thank you and your committee, and let me apologize again as chair where I usually have a better handle on what we're doing, so I apologize, commissioners, for some of the slip-ups this morning. And I will do better next time.
Mr. Chair, that is okay. I made a similar slip-up yesterday, given we have so many numbers in policy, so no worries at all.
Okay, so the next item is a district special populations update from Tess. You're recognized.
Commissioner Patterson, this is why people need to stay for rules, policy, and governance. They know what happens at the end of the day. So.
You just called me out because I was.
No,
Yes.
it was wrangling the troops yesterday afternoon. All right, thank you all. This special populations overview comes from a lot of the conversations that we at the commission have been having over the last several months. around how do our schools and we as a district provide oversight of our special populations, what are our responsibilities, what are our schools' responsibilities, and also what we as staff do to monitor our schools. So we have taken the opportunity to give you all a broad overview of both what those responsibilities are, what our monitoring looks like, and also to give you some demographic information around what the state demographics for special populations look like, what other charter schools demographics look like, as well as our own portfolio to contextualize this conversation. So first, we're going to briefly touch on what is required within state law for schools and LEAs. Then we're going to talk about what our team does around oversight and monitoring of our schools. We will then spend some time looking at demographic information, and then we'll talk about what we are looking forward to in terms of the next school year. So first, Tennessee Code Annotated 4913-111 is very clear with regard to compliance for charter schools and their responsibilities for serving special populations. So specifically, it says charter schools shall provide services for students with disabilities, English language learners, and other students with diverse needs. This is also reflected of what's in federal law. This is also reflective of what you will see throughout the charter school application, as well as our charter agreements with schools. They are also subject to all federal and state laws. Specifically, these are, when you look at the list of things that cannot be waived, nothing within the charter school statute can be waived. So they cannot discriminate against the basis of disabilities, race, creed, color, national origin, religion, ancestry, or the need for special education services. And lastly, I think it's important to point out that the code specifically states that authorizers shall hold charter schools responsible for compliance with all the requirements of this chapter of Tennessee Code Annotated, but for the purposes of this conversation, most specifically services of special populations. I do want to make sure, and we've talked about this a lot, is that the commission is specifically called out in statute as both the authorizer and the LEA. And this brings additional responsibilities from a federal perspective and a state perspective of what we're responsible for oversight and management. So when the Department of Education is monitoring districts, they are monitoring us. And therefore, we are responsible for ensuring that we then monitor our schools and have appropriate oversight of our schools and what they're doing for a whole host of things, but that includes our services to special populations. So I wanted to take an opportunity to give you all a broad overview of what our oversight and monitoring looks like. I did ask that our team that handles this work come up and support, so if you all have more specific questions and want to dive in, they are ready to go. So we have very comprehensive oversight and monitoring when it comes to special populations. And so I want to walk you all through what this looks like on an annual basis, our touch points. And this is high level. We have, again, we can get more into specifics as you all need it. So first and foremost, every year we are checking the application that a charter school is using when they are going out to potential students and asking them to apply to their school. So we have a check to make sure that they are not asking for anything that would be considered discriminatory, that they are offering that in languages that would be accessible to parents, and that they are running in a proper lottery process. That is something that is required within state law. We have a check with that as a part of the process. We then also review their enrollment form. Their enrollment form is what is used when a student has been accepted to a school, and then they are now saying, you're ready to enroll. What information are you collecting from that student? This is particularly important because we actually need a school to collect a lot of information from a student in order for them to be coded in our student information system correctly, to therefore be recorded in the state system, and then to generate funds. So these enrollment forms end up being quite lengthy. Everything from are they of the home language survey? Are they of non-English language background? The occupational survey, could they be identified as a potential migrant student? Military status, all of those are things that we would expect to see on an enrollment form and that we would provide feedback for schools if we are not seeing that level of information. We then do monthly special populations check-in calls with all schools. So we ask our schools as a part of the process every year to identify their point of contacts, both at the school level and a network, if applicable, of who is handling students with disabilities, English learners, students within foster care, students experience homelessness, et cetera. And then we have monthly check-ins where we cover what is happening, both what's happening within the school, challenges that they're seeing, but also the regular oversight and monitoring that we are conducting. That is a way both for the schools to have a direct line to us, but also for us to have a direct line to them. And I will say we have had experiences where schools are actually bringing problems to us, which we think is the best case scenario, right? We want to be partners. We want to help them in this work. And so that's really our monthly touch points. We also, and I think, Kelly and I have been in this long enough together, we have really refined our beginning of year checklist for schools. So the first 2 months of our school work is really intensive oversight because we want to make sure that IEPs are being transferred, and a lot of that has to do with the right data. Are you getting records from school districts? Kelly probably has nightmares of the times that she practically was driving around to different schools to get records, but that's a challenge for our schools, right? Are you screening non-English language background students in the required timeline? Are you then placing them and notifying parents? Those are all things that are happening in the beginning of the year. We're also checking licensure and teacher verification. Are you appropriately staffed? How are you providing this level of these services? The staff also does quarterly random checks of IEPs and individualized learning plans, or ILPs, for EL students. We have a set of procedures and policies that cover this. So we are randomly selecting from each school a set of these documents. I think one of the conversations we often have is, what does this look like as we scale, right? But this is also an important part of our check and monitoring when the department comes in annually and monitors IEPs. Then we get findings that then are sent to schools, right? So if we can catch things early, documentation is missing, signatures are missing, then we can support our schools in coming into compliance more quickly, such that when we get monitored by the department, we're in a better place. We also do reviews of services to special populations at site visits and do physical reviews of student records. So our student records, cumulative records, they contain the appropriate information. Like a great flag is every student has to have an occupational survey to determine if they are eligible they may be a migrant student, and that has to be a physical copy, and that survey has to be done every single year. So that's a great example of when we are on site, we will pull some cumulative files and see, do they actually have the occupational survey? As I mentioned, we do staffing reviews. So we are regularly checking in on the licensure and appropriate ratios around English language learners and students with disabilities. We also, during the site visits, want to see that in action. So we want to see actual services provided, and what does that look like for those students? We have newly instituted this year quality performance, quarterly performance reviews, which is a letter that is sent to each school and governing board that reviews on our organizational framework how they are kind of moving forward over the last quarter. So we are flagging for them. We noticed as a part of your quarterly monitoring of IEPs a missing set of documentation. This has already been communicated to the school, but it's a flag for the governing board and the executive director or school leader that this is something that they need to prioritize. We have gotten very positive feedback from our schools around these quarterly reviews. They are low stakes in the sense that we are just giving them a heads up that these are things we're monitoring and these are things we're seeing. They both show glows and grows, as one would say. And then finally, all of this is wrapped up in our annual reporting to schools. So we have both results-based monitoring, which is a federal focus. So schools get feedback specifically on their federal implementation of programs. I do think that in the next year or two, the commission will be selected by the Department of Education for in-person monitoring for federal programs. That is something that is just a regular occurrence. And so knowing that that in-person monitoring is likely going to happen in the next year or two, we are working to prepare our schools to be prepared for that level of monitoring. We also have the annual performance framework conversation we had yesterday, where things around services to special populations are also captured in that area. I do want to note that the last conversation that we had, we talked a lot about how our schools publicizing information about special populations, services to English learners, students with disabilities on their websites. And so we actually, as a staff, looked at all operators' websites. I would say the majority had an opportunity for improvement. So we communicated to all operators and said, not only is it important for you to include non-discrimination language, which I would say most all did, but it's also important for you to include a description of the kind of services that you provide to students with disabilities, as well as English language learners, and to show that parents who are looking at your website are able to see a little bit about what those programs are. So we actually reached out to all of our operators with that information. We received very positive feedback and have confirmed at this point that all of our operators did include that additional language around their programmatic offerings so that, again, we can be an exemplar authorizer. You know, I do think one of the things that the commission does have to think about is we are both an LEA and an authorizer, and so we do toe this line around autonomy, right? And so we do want to make sure that their schools are upholding their responsibilities, but the way that they do that needs to be within their own autonomy, such that it's in the compliance of law. So this is a conversation that our team has a lot around how do we make sure that they are meeting the letter of the law, they're serving students appropriately, but also that we're giving them that level of autonomy that they're afforded under charter law. So I want to move into high-level demographic information for you all, and then happy to open it up to questions. So I will just say, first and foremost, a lot of this data is pulled from different data sets, and so me as a little bit of a math nerd, I just want to caveat that like some of these counts may be slightly different because they're counting slightly different things, right? We're trying to get the general picture, okay? And so some of the years are a little bit different, and the way the TDOE counts English language proficiency may be a little bit different than how Shelby County does, right? These are all these data definitions, so I just want to put a broad disclaimer that it kind of makes me tweak, but you know, we're not going to lose the forest from the trees. So overall, we do see, here I have provided to you all in this presentation is in your binders as well, what the overall Tennessee subgroup population is for limited English proficiency as well as students with disabilities. And so what's interesting is you can see that from the Metro Nashville point of view of the entire district, much higher English language proficiency than the state, which is not surprising, but a little lower percentage of students with disabilities than the overall state. And then similarly, when you look at Memphis, Shelby County schools, you can see that their ranges of students, limited English proficiency and students with disabilities are around 11%. So then I wanted to pull data about what are all charter schools within the districts that we currently serve? What are their percentages? And so here I have provided the demographics for Metro Nashville Public Schools. So again, overall, their percentages are listed at the top. But what I found very interesting is the wide spectrum of demographics by charter school, depending on where that charter school is located, who they serve. So you can see here for the percentage of English learners, the average across all MNPS charter schools is 15.6%. But when you actually dig into that data, that can range from 5% to 65%. And then when we look at students with disabilities, again, the average was 12%, but the range there is 7% to 21%. When we looked at Memphis Shelby County schools, we saw very similar trends, where the average English learners across all Memphis Shelby County schools was 10.7%, but you saw a range from 0% to 55%. And then similarly for charter schools, when it comes to students with disabilities, you saw that their average is 7.3%, with the range across schools 0.7% to 16%. So I give this data as a snapshot of how we're trying to conceptualize and contextualize how our schools may fit into the bigger picture of both their district, other charter schools, and the state. Here is the demographic information from, again, as best as one could, the data is not perfect, around what the English learners percentage is. So you can see a very wide difference. You can see Bluff City High School is sitting at 13%. You can see our Nashville schools actually exceeding what the Metro Nashville Public Schools average is around 32%. And then you can see our schools that have transitioned from the Achievement School District have relatively low percentages of English learners. And then when we look at students with disabilities, our schools similarly have a bit of a range. We have Libertas, which is not surprising, with the highest at 22.8%. We have other schools that are in the 10 to 15%, and then we also have Nashville Collegiate Prep at 4%. And then the last piece of demographic information, which I want to credit our chair for asking about, and it was actually very interesting, is to pull demographic information by network. So we are lucky to have schools operated within the commission portfolio by charter management organizations that also serve and operate other schools. So this, although we only had 4 schools within our portfolio last year, we're actually able to look to see what does the network's other schools look like, to get a sense of how these percentages shake out. So as you can see, our first school is KIPP Nashville. Their students with disabilities at our KIPP Antioch schools are slightly lower than what they serve at their other schools, but their English language proficiency is much higher than what they serve at their other schools. This trends with the area of town that they are located in, but also I think is very reflective of, if I had our KIPP Nashville folks here, they would talk about how they've really had to reflect and change their model and their staffing when they operated in a new area of town, simply because they did have more English learners than they previously had served. And so they've had to really reflect and build out capacity to serve those students. Noble Education Initiative, they also serve and operate the Knowledge Academy schools. And so you can see here that their students with disabilities at their Knowledge Academy schools are very high. It's actually, I think, 21.5% is the highest charter school within Metro Nashville Public Schools. And their limited English proficiency is similar, very high, as compared to other schools within, with other charter schools within the network. Green Dot schools, other than Bluff City High School, operate within the Achievement School District, so all of their schools are operated under the ASD. You'll see that they do have a relatively high students with disabilities population at Bluff City High School. And I would say, as you can see, their Wooddale Middle has a much higher limited English proficiency than the rest of their network. Capstone Education Group, this is the CMO that operates our Cornerstone Prep School, which hasn't opened yet, so we don't have demographics there, but they do operate 2 of the schools that just transferred from the Achievement School District. Again, it's very interesting to see what the broad range of demographics serve. So everything from almost 9.5% limited English proficiency to less than 5% at another school. And finally, Rocket Ship. Again, Rocket Ship Dream hasn't opened yet, but certainly I would expect that they would have a relatively high limited English proficiency just based on the area of town that they're located in. But this is information that we will be able to pull once students enroll in the school. So wanted to share, looking forward, what you can expect. So September and October is a big month for us, not because we won't be discussing charter school appeals, but because it's a big enrollment true-up for our district. So what happens is in September, we pull actual student enrollment from all of our schools. And we then reallocate federal funds based on actual student enrollment. So that means the percentage of students with disabilities, English learners, et cetera, federal funds are reallocated based on those true-ups. And at that point, we will have a much better sense of what school level enrollment and school level demographics are for our 9 schools across the portfolio. So you all should expect that in October, as a part of an update on this conversation, that I will be providing to you all updated demographic information. It is challenging during the summer months to provide accurate information because students are enrolling, records haven't been transferred, students haven't been identified yet, and so you can expect a much more accurate update in October. My fabulous team will be conducting ongoing technical monitoring assistance to schools. I think they were happy to share and talk very much in detail around the work that they do. And I also think that one of the things that we really look for in our New Start applications is capacity and preparedness to serve special populations. We make sure that we have a special education and EL expert that's reviewing our charter applications to provide that lens, right? It's not just do you say the right words, but it's do you actually have the capacity to implement this well. I often talk about what are the big things that we can't fail on. This is what we cannot fail on, and so that's why we staff the way we staff. That's why we have the oversight the way we have oversight. And I would say if you talk to some of our operators, they feel like we may have too much oversight in this area, and I'm happy to argue with that on a daily basis. And then finally, I wanted to wrap up that I know we had a long conversation at the previous commission meeting about our Nashville Collegiate Prep School, which, as we noted, is a little bit of an outlier when it comes to their percentage of students with disabilities. They were in their first year, so we are eager to see what their year 2 enrollment is. After our meeting in June, we did sit down and have a conversation with the operator to get updates on where were they in terms of recruitment, specifically how are they ensuring that they are recruiting students and making sure that their school is open to all students. So they spoke about visiting preschools and family events, and not only ensuring that they are providing opportunities for any student to enroll, but also bringing interpreters along so that parents who may not have strong English skills are able to understand and engage with the school. We also talked a lot about the work that they're doing to increase their special populations oversight and staffing within the network. So they've hired a special populations coordinator at the network level that's going to be working with all of their schools. They also have a special education coordinator that's now located within the school that's going to be running point on those services at the school. And also we talked a lot about their screening process, so both using the RTI process, but how do we ensure that they are getting access to information from other school districts early when students transfer in, so that we are very quickly able to identify students who have a variety of needs. They don't need to be retested in the case of an English learner, and we're able to really implement those services quickly. We also had a conversation, as I mentioned, about their website to ensure that they, amongst the other operators, were updated as it relates to just the programs and services to their special populations. I'm now happy to pause, take whatever questions you all have. We have staff here that I've warned that we may have some questions. They're ready to go. And also we do have representatives from Noble Education Initiative, should there be additional questions that we'd like to recognize them for as well. And I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Thank you, Tess. And let me thank the staff that I know the work that you've done. And I will personally express to you, when we sat down and talked about it, of sort of putting a broader perspective on this so that we can really understand how our schools line up when looking at charters as a whole, And then the drill down on our specific schools. As you know, I had a conversation with one of the charter schools in Chattanooga to get a better feel for this, to look at their website and to share some of that. So I appreciate working with you and with the team in trying to take this snapshot and give us a much broader look at it. So thank you for that. And now we'll turn to Commissioner Tucker.
You didn't even have to look. I love that. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for the update. Thank you for the data. I'm a data nerd too, so I'm taking it with a grain of salt.
Please do. It was really hard, but it data's not perfect, and you gotta live with that. So.
Right. And I do think it shows that I'm glad that you're meeting with the Nashville Collegiate Prep folks, because it definitely shows that you said kind of an outlier. It's a pretty strong outlier at 4%, but I'm glad that they're sounding proactive and that they want to address that. A couple things, and then a couple questions. So the website stuff, thank you. That makes, as a parent of a kid with a disability, that makes a world of difference if I get on and I see, because, the narrative around charters is that they don't have to educate kids with disabilities. And so if you get on the website and you don't see any mention of it, that feeds that, as opposed to seeing, oh, they actually have a special populations program, or they actually mention special ed. So thank you for doing that. I think that probably wasn't easy work to go through all of that, but being able to make that kind of change is important. The monitoring, I know we've had conversations about how that's gonna work as you scale and as we grow across the state. One question I have, I love the site visits, I love the random IEP checks. Are you combining those two? Because you can look at a document, I see some nods, that's great. IEPs can look perfect on paper, as you guys know, but if it's not implemented that way, it doesn't really matter. And so being able to walk in, pull an IEP, and then that's what you guys are doing. So
I'm happy to have Kelly, if you want to speak more about that.
I want to make sure you get credit for those nods. That's fantastic.
Thank you for that question, Commissioner Tucker. My name is Kelly Croneman. I'm the manager of federal programs and special populations. And to answer your question, yes, when we are going in for our site visits, we will actually have a student's IEP, or we may do a snapshot of the accommodations and services we expect to see as they're stated in their IEP. And we go in and we look to see, are those services being implemented? Are those accommodations being provided in the general education classroom as well? Because that's another important piece, right? It's not just are the students receiving the special education and related services, but are the general education teachers, receiving the support that they need to be able to accommodate for those students appropriately. So yes, we do look for those as well.
Perfect. And this may not fall under your umbrella, but for kids with 504 plans, is that or is that your umbrella too?
That's
you have
still
a big
my umbrella.
Excellent. Okay. Okay, great. The enrollment checks, I mean, obviously you've pulled data, but you're continuing to track that, I'm assuming, from our schools as part of your monitoring to make sure that enrollment for students with disabilities and EL, I know on the performance framework, there's I guess, trying to find a way to look for counseling out and that sort of stuff. So I'm assuming that's.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of our monthly monitoring, looking at student data at the school level and then what we see at the district is a really big piece of that. And by student data, I'm specifically talking about number of students served by that school within these different special population subgroups. So we do that for multiple reasons. First, and one of the first reasons is to make sure that what we're seeing at the district level reflects what the schools are seeing, because we need to make sure that if a school has identified a student and is serving that student, that's accurately reflected in the data that then gets fed up to the state and generates funding. We want to make sure that the schools are receiving the resources they need to serve those students well. We also do that to make sure that we are understanding the number and percentage of students at that school that are being served, because that does have an impact on the way that we are monitoring, maybe the number of files that we're pulling, or if we see any big jumps or dips in the numbers, that can allow us to know, okay, we need to dig a little bit further and get an understanding of what may be going on here, what the story is.
Okay, great. And then I think I'd mentioned this at some point, but these percentages, these numbers are great. I'm assuming you do, so I think I know the answer to this question. gathering the data on the disability categories that are served in each school? And if so, is that publicly available, or if not publicly available, is that data that we could get as commissioners? And the reason I ask this for my fellow commissioners is it is vastly different to provide appropriate services and supports for a student, say with, every student's different, but ADHD or dyslexia versus a student who is nonverbal, needs one-on-one supports, or a student who maybe falls under the autism spectrum. So knowing what categories are served on top of these percentages gives an indication, I think, of the welcoming message that the schools are giving and what they're doing, what they're equipped to do for kids with disabilities.
Yeah, thank you again for that question, Commissioner Tucker. We do have that data available, but that's where we kind of get into the area of this is getting really close to data that I feel should be protected for students. We're talking about really, really small incisors in some situations. So I'd be really happy to provide that data to you guys after the meeting.
Okay.
And then if you have follow-up questions, I would be happy to address this.
Okay, awesome. And then I have a bunch of notes here, lucky me. One question, and this is sort of a broader question, and it's more of a potential legislative conversation, but one thing that could be done in a state is and some states do it, could have the opportunity for charters to use weighted lotteries for populations that they are not, a lot of charters say we can't recruit kids with disabilities because of all the privacy laws and we don't have lists. And so you can weight a lottery where it's just that the student has a disability is checked by the parent as an option, and then their lottery admission is weighted higher than one that doesn't. So that's an option that would have to be done legislatively. Another option, if we were to support something like that, would be an opportunity for authorizers to use that as a tool for schools that are showing that they're not reaching the numbers that, schools that are outliers. So I would love, I don't need an answer now because I'm just throwing this out there, but I would love to have a conversation with the staff about whether that would be something we could get behind, because I'm sure I could help sort of start that conversation in the next session, because we've seen that work in places like Colorado and some other places to really be able to give schools the tools they need, with the privacy laws there, to be able to enroll kids with disabilities at a higher level.
Do other commissioners have questions? Commissioner Hanson.
Now that we've gotten the varsity questions out of the way, we'll go to the, two JV questions that might be for Commissioner Tucker, might be for staff. I guess I'm wondering, on our oversight and monitoring activities, could we have some sort of context versus what other LEAs in Nashville or Tennessee or some of our group, are we roughly in line with, more robust? Any context there for dummies?
Sure. I will say anecdotally, and then happy for Kelly and Reggie to correct me. I think anecdotally, we probably have more robust oversight and monitoring than other districts. I think because we are so small and we have laser focused on our schools. And I would say, like I explained to operators, you are one of 9, right, upcoming school year. So that means if something is, if the department if the department monitors the commission, guess what? You don't have one of 175 schools to pick from, you have one of 9, right? So we all are in this together to make sure that the students are being served, et cetera. So, I do think we have robust monitoring procedures, not to say that other districts don't, but I think districts are much, much larger than what we are. And so we are able to have a collaborative relationships. I also think we hear from our schools that we are more accessible, more helpful, support them in ways that they don't always receive from the districts that they've also worked with. But I will let Kelly and Reggie add on any color commentary to that.
Sure, I'm happy to add on a little bit to that. In terms of our special education monitoring that we do on a quarterly basis, we've really worked in the last few years, and I say few because I was with the state board before this, but we've really worked to really align those as much as possible with the annual IEP monitoring that the Department of Education does for districts. The reason that we do that is, of course, we don't want our schools to have to deal with any gotchas, right? And we want to make sure our students are being served appropriately. But for a school SPED team, when we have to come to them with findings, it represents a lot of administrative work for them. So the goal is, let's build that capacity on the front end. Let's make sure that everyone's really clear on what the requirements are, and let's do that monitoring frequently so that there's opportunities to catch issues early before we get to the point where the state is monitoring us as a district and pulling those files from the school and seeing things. Now, those monitoring opportunities from the state still do generate findings, and that's a great opportunity for us to revisit our technical assistance that we're providing to our schools as well. In terms of English learners, I would say, I would agree with Tess, we do have a very high level of oversight with that as well. A lot of what we look at is the staffing piece. Are our schools compliant with the 1:35 ratio? Looking at that early in the beginning of the year, making sure our schools are screening students appropriately. But then we do a quarterly pool of the individualized learning plans, making sure that our schools have appropriate accommodations and services for their students that are outlined in those, making sure that they're communicating with the parents appropriately. And as Tess said, we're a small district, so we can do that with every single school, every single quarter. That is something that, as we scale, is a concern for us because we want to be able to maintain a really high level of oversight. Serving these students is incredibly important to us, as I know it's important to you. So that's something that we continue to talk about, is how do we maintain a really high quality support system for our schools that includes technical assistance, that includes monitoring on a frequent basis for all schools when, we're a Special Pops team of 2. And who knows how many schools we'll have in the coming years.
Thank you for the context. The second question is around thank you for the staff for unpacking the demographics by CMO and by system. That's fascinating. I guess my question, either for staff or maybe for Commissioner Tucker, is on some of these outliers as we see. So if in your day job, Commissioner Tucker, you saw the MSCS charter school range at a 0, would you, I guess this is hard to ask as a question. I'm wondering, there are situations where you have a brand new school and it's brand new application pool and the N size is small. I can totally understand that for a brand new school. I guess I'm wondering if an MSCS charter school, I'm assuming it's probably not new, and you saw a 0, would you think that would be evidence of active exclusion for students with disabilities, or any other comments there? That I guess I'm wondering, can we learn a lesson from someone else without having, what's the Mark Twain saying, the man carrying a cat by its tail learns a lesson you can learn no other way? Could we learn the lesson from someone else?
What? So I actually have already flagged for myself to
That's a
look.
varsity question.
I like the cat. I love cats, so don't grab my cat by the tail. The 0 is concerning, unless it is, even with a brand new school, just, for English language learners, even with schools of choice, often the sort of location matters because populations, often live in communities together. For people with disabilities, they happen everywhere. And statistically, it doesn't make sense that you would have no students with disabilities in your school unless you are not welcoming them or you're counseling them out, or there's another problem. So it doesn't make sense that there's a 0. It also doesn't make sense, frankly. Memphis Shelby County Schools has a large charter school population that their average charter population is 7.3%. is alarming. That's not our business, I guess. It's my business in my day job. But so those are both red flags to me that there are issues there that I was actually planning to reach out to some of my friends who do work in Memphis.
And to add on, I do want to compliment the Shelby County's charter school office because they have an incredibly detailed 8-year-old report that lists all charter schools and their percentage on a bar graph of percentage of students with disabilities, percentages of EL. And so that is
transparency.
It's amazing transparency. And so honestly, when I found that report, I'm going to text them later, that is exactly, and I sent it to my staff and I said, this is what we need because it's helpful, it engages the conversation, and it's helpful for stakeholders and families. So I do want to compliment their work because it was very helpful in this pulling together this presentation to see that detailed analysis.
Yep. No, and I think that's great. And maybe my organization just did something in Denver and looked at websites and real law changes happened there because there was unintentional counseling out by some of the things that were being put on websites that they didn't realize. So there could be something happening in Memphis that does that. I will say for kids with disabilities, especially when you have choice, families, like word of mouth matters too. And so, the schools like Libertas and some schools, Williamson County schools, where we moved to serve my kid with a disability, like the word of mouth was, these are good schools for kids with disabilities. So it works the opposite way too. So if the charter schools in certain places, and again, I don't know the reason for this 7.3, but it could be that the message is out there either from the schools, like, we don't want you, we don't do kids like you, which is illegal but happens, and I'm not saying they're doing it, I'm just saying it happens in places, or families are like, they don't do kids like ours, could be happening, I don't know, but it is definitely something that I have taken a note of.
Thank you, Commissioner Tucker, and thank you,
Sure.
staff.
Any other commissioners? Tess, let me ask you this. So how often could we update this and put it as information shared back with commissioners? What you've done, because I like, as you know, because we talked a lot
Yeah.
about it, the in-depth that you did here. So it was a very good comparative, I think, across the board. So could
So-
we do it every, twice a year or what? I mean, it's when you've got data, so. what
Yeah,
could
so
we
I
do?
think what we can absolutely do is update the commissioners in October with what our portfolio of schools look like. A lot of this data for the non-commissioned schools is reliant on other people's data. So I would hesitate to say we'll be ready in October just because it'll be dependent on when data is available. But I think absolutely what we can plan on is twice a year, we can update the commission on what our portfolio is looking like. And then to give you all contextual information around other charter school data, other geographic data, and state data so that you all can see where it fits in the bigger picture.
No, thank you. And, for example, we would add in here if we have a charter school in another city where we're not now, then we go back in and do the same thing. And look at the universe we've got. If there's other ways that we ought to cut and slice and dice. I'm an English major, not a math nerd. That's why I enjoyed working with you on this, because we could talk about this part. But if there's other ways that we ought to add, or other things we ought to add in here, ask you all to keep that in mind, because what I liked is I had a chance to look at this was the depth and breadth and the comparatives that were there.
And I will just say, with the implementation of TISA, with student-weighted funding, this data becomes even more important, right? Because districts will get additional funding. We will pass that on to schools. So we already have clean eyes on this, but it will be even more so. So I think that all kind of ties together into this, I think, where we are going just generally. And the last thing I will say is that we have committed to our schools that one of the things that with the implementation of TISA, we're going to be looking at how we are allocating our IDEA and Title III funds to be thinking about, can we mirror some of the weighted formula for those funding streams? We have an upcoming operator conversation in August to get feedback on that. That would be for the FY24, like what fiscal year are we in? FY24 federal funds, so not this year, but as TISA is rolled out, our federal funding would then hopefully become more weighted around those pools of money too. But again, this is all signaling the importance of serving students with disabilities and English learners, and particularly serving those high-need students as well.
Commissioner Tucker?
That was a perfect segue. So I promised I would do this, so I'm going to take a point of privilege, and it is related. I am once again hosting Urban Leaders Fellows this year. I did it last year, and last year I think they recommended weighted IDEA funding, so they will be happy to hear that you're looking at that. But I have 6 fellows this year who are looking at issues of how, as we scale, we continue quality as a commission, including students with disabilities, English language learners. So I think they're all watching. I think I may have some in the room. I have 2 of my fellows in the room. So Allison, Sophie, Taylor, Michelle, Alexa, and Aaron are the 6 fellows. And when they give us their final deliverable, I will do what I did last year, pass it on to Tess. Tess share it with the commissioners. But they're here, or some virtually, but for 6 weeks, really digging into a policy issue. And so I was like, we're getting big fast, and we need to know how to stay good at it. So this was a perfect segue for that, so I wanted to give them a shout out.
Thank you. And Tess, thank you and the team for this report. And we'll move to our next one, which is from Beth Figueroa and Maggie Lunn on New Start appeals that will come before the commission in October. So Beth, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Griscom. And my name is Beth Figueroa, and I will be walking you through the New Start Charter School appeal process. To begin, I would like to mention that this is the Commission's second year of going through the New Start appeal process. Oh, my mic. Is that better? Short. I'm short. Sorry, guys. And it's really important that we ground ourselves in this work and that we understand the process that Commission staff undertakes when we prepare the recommendation. It's also important that you as commissioners feel really comfortable with the process and understand what your responsibility is prior to taking action on any of the New Start appeals that are received. So as we go through today's presentation, I'll leave space between certain sections to answer any questions that you have. And with that, I will jump right in. First and foremost, I want to begin today by providing you with a high-level overview of the New Start appeal process and the key components that go into the recommendation that come before the Commission in October. Please keep in mind that the process for each of our schools that will be going through an appeal began back in December 2021 when the sponsor filed their letter of intent with their local district. And it has been since their initial filing of their intent to apply that they submitted their initial application to the district. In most cases, that initial application was denied by the local district, and they were provided an opportunity to update or amend that application. And then, hit the button. And then after submitting their amended application to the district, in most cases, they have been since denied. So we started the New Start cycle with 17 initial applications in the state of Tennessee. One application was approved by Hamilton County Schools, and 2 amended applications were approved, one by Rutherford County Schools and one by Memphis Shelby County Schools. So this leaves 14 applications that have either since been denied or that we are waiting to hear the outcome from our district. And we will go into detail on the status of those 14 applications in a subsequent slide. Upon receipt of an appeal, staff begins to collect information from both the appellant and the local district in order to begin building out our record. Records from the LEA include information related to their denial of the application, a list of the individuals that reviewed their application, and the information that they provided to their board for the purpose of making their final decision on the amended application. This amended application and budget documents are then provided to our review committee members, and they begin their de novo review of the application, and they also conduct a capacity interview with the applicant. Lastly, Commission staff conducts a public hearing, and we accept public comments both in writing as well as orally. The public hearing is a really important step in this process, as it allows us to hear directly from the community regarding the application, and it also allows us the opportunity to determine whether there is community support for the proposed school. It also provides us an opportunity to hear directly from the district regarding the reasons for their denial, and we get to learn more about the application and the proposed services that they will be providing. The information gathered through this process begins to build out the record, which is then used by our executive director when preparing her findings and recommendation report. Within the executive director's recommendation report, our executive director, Tess Stovall, will either recommend approval of the application or affirm the district's decision to deny the application. The entirety of the appeals process must be completed within a maximum of 75 days. And I would like to add here that we have held webinars with both LEAs and sponsors as it relates to the New Start appeal process, because we want to make sure that we've been very clear and transparent about the process and they understand what it would look like should they submit an appeal to the Commission. So at this time, the Commission has already begun receiving appeals as illustrated in this slide. I will note that these charts were prepared as of Wednesday, July 27th, and so this information does continue to change, but we will be notifying commissioners as we do receive appeals and we confirm. So the first chart is of appeals that have been received, and the second is of appeals that are in progress. And this second chart reflects sponsors that have notified the commission of their intent to appeal. However, they have not yet submitted all of their materials. And again, this was as of July 27th. It is ever changing daily, by the hour, sometimes the minute. And then lastly, as we look at our next slide, we have LEA denied. These are schools that have been denied by the LEA, and we're still waiting to hear from them about whether or not they intend to appeal. And then we are still waiting on one local LEA decision. For some context here, I just want to add that the most applications that State Board approved, or not approved, excuse me, processed was in 2014, and it was 6 applications. And so for context here, we're looking at 14 potential appeals. And so I would like to state that we have a calendar. This is possible, but this is going to be a very intensive August and September and early October for commission staff. I will now dive
And
into...
for commissioners, too.
Oh, yes, I'm so sorry.
That's all
Of
right. No
course.
problem.
We will get to that point as we go.
You all will have homework, so be blocking off your weekends in September.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll now dive into the review committee portion of this presentation, where we will discuss the role that our review committee plays in the review of the application, why we utilize review committees, and why this is so important so that we can ensure that our process is implemented with fidelity. In accordance with Commission Policy 2.100, Application Review, the Commission is required to assemble a review committee to review each of the New Start applications that it receives. The use of the review committee is consistent with best practices that are recognized not only by here in Tennessee, but it's also nationally accepted by other charter authorizing bodies. Now, in order to ensure that we have a rigorous approval and review process, review committees are assembled in a manner that reflect a variety of experience and expertise, and that this experience is vetted through a thorough recruitment and screening process. So individuals who are interested in serving as a review committee member begin by completing an application, and they submit their resume. The information is submitted and reviewed by members of the authorizing team, and we follow up by phone, and in many cases we held a virtual interview with these individuals. The interview process provides us the opportunity to determine whether they are able to bring an objective and unbiased approach to their review of the application, and also provides us a better understanding of what their unique experience is, and that helps us when identifying which review committee would be the most appropriate to place them on. So throughout this process, we're specifically looking for individuals that have high levels of experience in academics, special populations, Tess spoke about this earlier, English language learners, operations, and finance. And we've also began to ask questions regarding academic models that they are familiar with, whether it be Montessori, STEM, arts, just to name a few. The Commission compensates review committee members with a $700 stipend per application, and this is to recognize the extensive work and contribution that they give us to this process. And we also want to ensure that they are providing us with a high-quality review. The last thing I will add as it relates to review committees is that I want to thank all of our authorizing team. We've been working very hard to recruit additional review committee members throughout the spring and the summer, knowing that we were anticipating the potential of a higher volume. And so just for context, we will have approximately 30 review committee members that we will be working with and managing this New Start appeal cycle. And this includes, it's comprised of both external reviewers as well as our internal staff. So this cycle, our review committee consists of a number of individuals with varying experience. It includes current and former charter school leaders, current and former charter school authorizing staff. This is both here in Tennessee as well as nationally. We have individuals that have public school experience, both as teachers and administrators, legal and finance experts, experts with curriculum, instruction, federal programs and special populations experts, like what we heard today, which was wonderful. And we also look for geographical representation. We want to make sure that the individuals reviewing the application understand the community that the school is proposing to locate in. We also utilize internal commission staff on all review committees. And the use of internal staff is really essential because they deeply understand the process and they also understand the context of authorization better than anybody else on the committee. In order to serve on a review committee, individuals are required to attend an annual training, and this is conducted and held by our authorizing team. The training involves providing an overall orientation of the process and general instructions on how to review a New Start application. As a part of the review committee training and the norming process, participants are provided a sample application, and they're provided an opportunity to score the application based on the TDOE scoring rubric. They're also trained in how to write objective and clear feedback based on what they garnered from their review. During this training, review committee members are trained in how to conduct capacity interviews, which includes how to pose open-ended questions and determine what is important to cover during our 90 minutes with the application versus what may not be as important to cover. I wanted to note here that as we go through our New Start appeal cycle, we do have some individuals, it's a single sponsor that is applying for multiple different locations. And so we will be holding true to our process. And so we will be, even though the capacity interview will be combined, it will be extended in order to remain true to our current policy. Since review committees are conducted, they are conducting a de novo review of the application. We explained to them during the training that they will not be provided the reason for denial by the LEA, but instead we emphasize that their review of the application and their final evaluation of the quality of the application should be formulated based on their review, what's included in TDOE's rubric, and what was found out during their capacity interview. Additionally, during training, we cover a consensus building process because it's important for individuals to understand that the recommendation is not formed solely based on who's the loudest in the room, and that we do consider who has the subject matter expertise in the academics, finance, operations. And so the consensus building process is really everybody being heard and their perspective understood. As previously mentioned, we will be utilizing approximately 30 review committee members during the upcoming appeal cycle, and we really worked to create each of our committees in a way that balanced all areas of expertise, and we also do seek out information related to any potential or real conflicts of interest, and we ask that they disclose those prior to beginning a review. We also work to ensure that we give geographical consideration because we understand the importance of having individuals on committees that understand the community that the school is proposing to locate. And we also want to make sure that they understand the local context. As a result of the high volume of appeals that the Commission has already received and the additional appeals that we anticipate receiving in the next few weeks, I should say, we have made some changes from the way we previously processed our New Start appeals. So first, we will be utilizing external lead reviewers. These individuals will take on responsibilities above and beyond a traditional review committee member. This will include assisting with summarizing review committee rubrics, drafting capacity interview questions, as well as writing portions of the review committee report. We're also contracting with an external consultant to act as a lead reviewer on 3 separate reviews that are managed by various commission staff. This is to ensure fidelity across all committees and that one staff member is not running the process differently than another staff member. So we are working to ensure consistency. The contractor will also be analyzing the results of the feedback that we receive from our review committee members at the conclusion of the process, so that way we can receive a formative feedback and make improvements to our process moving forward.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask that you provide to the commission members the background on the external consultant that's being utilized, just so we have it in advance so we know how this process is going this year?
Absolutely. I'd
Thank
be happy
you.
to do so, Chair. I'm not Chair. Commissioner Richards. Thank you. So here's a very generic timeline of what is shared with our review committee members as they begin to conduct their work. Individuals on review committees are provided a very clear timeline. This is very broad because our timelines are happening and occurring at all different times. But this allows committee members, when they accept and agree to be on a review committee, we want to make sure that they understand the expectations, the key dates, and the deadlines that they will be meeting. I also wanted to provide this to you to call out all of the different touch points that we have throughout the process as we work to build consensus. And this includes a prep call with the entire review committee, the capacity interview, as well as the debrief process. I'll also point out that this is why we do provide a stipend for review, because as you can see, the list of items that they are responsible to participate in is quite comprehensive. Before I move on to the next portion, I would like to pause and answer any questions that you have regarding what we've covered so far.
Okay, Beth, let me ask you one thing. In looking at this timeline and knowing the number that we have, is there any way that we as commissioners could get this material a few days earlier, just so there's additional time to really review it? I mean, up to now, it's been okay because we just had, one or two. But knowing the list that we have, I would ask you, in Tess, working with if we would be able as commissioners to see this information a little bit earlier, I think would be helpful. It'd be helpful to me, and I'm assuming to most commissioners, to be able to have a little extra time to review it, because we clearly want to be spending the time and coming in here well informed when we have the actual appeal hearings. So.
Sure. I think later on in Beth's presentation, we're going to talk to you about proposed dates in which you all would receive materials. Okay. So I think we should pause on that slide and talk about, is that early enough? Do you all need more time, so that we can then go back to the drawing board? So I think when we get there, let's just make sure to pause.
Absolutely.
Do other commissioners have questions right now? Beth, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your question. So we will now transition to public hearings, and this is the portion of the New Start appeal process where we hear directly from the LEA as well as the applicant, and this takes place in the district in which the school is proposing to locate. So the public hearing is not only required, but I will say that commission staff often hears from parties that have gone through the appeal process with us that this is the part of the appeals process that they feel the most heard and that they feel the most valued. So that said, the commission is required to hold the public hearing in the district boundaries that the school is proposing to locate. And based on the list of confirmed and potential appeals previously discussed, commission staff anticipates that we will be traveling to up to 8 different districts to hold these hearings. And most of these will take place during the month of September. Tess will be presiding over these public hearings, and both the sponsor and the school, the sponsor of the school, as well as the local board of education, will be provided the opportunity for opening and closing statements, and they will have the opportunity to answer questions directly from the executive director. We will also have time dedicated to public comments, and this is a really meaningful part of the public hearing, as it allows commission staff to hear directly from the community about whether or not it supports the school and that the location that the school is proposing to locate. So to summarize, the purpose of the hearing is to determine and confirm, first, the process that the LEA took in reviewing and scoring the application. Secondly, whether there is sufficient community support to affirm the applicant's ability to operate in the proposed geographical region, but also to meet enrollment projections. I'll call out that yesterday during our School Performance and Accountability Committee meeting, we did discuss the pre-opening process, and as you recall, we do have schools that are currently struggling to meet their enrollment projections, and so really this is a time during the public hearing where we can really get a good sense of what the community is saying about the school. We also look at the applicant's ability to implement the proposed plan successfully. Next, we'll move to discuss staff's review of...
Beth, may I ask, pardon me if I interrupt you. Everything we're talking about right now anybody who is doing an appeal will be able to see exactly the process that's followed. And everybody's going to be treated the same way. Everybody has the same type of procedures being done. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. We are working
Okay.
to ensure the integrity of the process, to protect staff, review committee members, commissioners. Everything will be
Great. Thank you.
across the board.
Thank you.
The same, yes.
And I will just add, as you mentioned, Beth, we have held 2 webinars for applicants and 1 webinar for districts that in essence covered the exact same information. This past slide was the exact same one because we want to make sure that, and I shared this with districts, our goal in the appeal process is to make sure that both parties are prepared and know what is expected and what we need and how to move forward through the process. And so, I think one of the things we are trying to do is streamline communication. So every Friday, all applicants and all districts get an email with everything they need to know for the next coming week, so that we are very clear, even with the amount of appeals that we likely will receive, that we are being responsive to them and that they know what to expect for the upcoming week.
Yes. Okay. So next we will talk about staff reviews of the record. So staff review of the record is led by myself, Ashley, our general counsel, and Tess Stovall, our executive director. As a part of our review of the record, we consider everything that has been submitted to us. This includes the information that was submitted by the local district, the sponsor, as well as our review committees and the public comments that are received. Based on the entirety of the documentation provided, which are a part of this comprehensive record, a recommendation will be provided to the commission. The recommendation is based on whether the application meets or exceeds the metrics outlined in the TDOE scoring rubric. And again, we are utilizing the same rubric as all of the districts are utilizing. And we're also considering whether the application is in the best interest of students, LEAs, and the community. I will now move into the commissioner's review of the record. So this is where it will get fun for you all. So it is the commissioner's responsibility to conduct a de novo review of the applications that are submitted to the commission on appeal. As such, you will receive the materials in advance, and these will include the materials that were submitted by the LEA and sponsor, and you will be looking at this. You also will be doing a fresh eyes, a new review, and it is okay if you align with the decision of the district, or in some instances, you may not exactly align with the district. As a brief flag, I want to recognize that, similarly to what I mentioned previously, the operators started going through this process in December of 2021. And so we recognize that there are certain instances where some items may have changed. And so as part of our due diligence process, there are certain instances where we do have to request additional information. And any additional information that is gathered is vetted through general counsel and the records process. So there could be instances where an appellant could reach out to you directly, and they may want to provide you additional information that falls outside of this record that we're talking about. And in these instances, it's very important that these individuals are pointed back to commission staff and our general counsel, as the information cannot be a part of your decision-making process on these appeals. Instead, it needs to go through the record creation process. The process that commission staff undertakes when building out the records was explained in our webinar to LEAs and the applicants, so they have also been made aware of the fact that they cannot reach out to you and provide additional information for the purpose of making the decision. Once the record is complete, commission staff will be providing commissioners a copy of the record, and this is going to include correspondence from commission staff to the parties, a notice of appeal from the sponsor. This year we will be recording our capacity interviews, and so you will be provided with a copy of that recording. You will hear, you will be provided a link for the public hearing, and you will receive public comments, and then the executive director's recommendation report, which will be inclusive of the review committee report and written statements in response to the recommendation. So as you approach the record, I will be honest and share, and as many of you can attest, that it can be quite daunting at first when you open your folders and you see that there are a lot of documents, and many of them are hundreds of pages in certain instances. And so it's not uncommon for a certain application to have close to 100 documents per review. So as you begin, I would suggest that you start with the executive director's recommendation, and this will help you become familiar with the areas of strength and or weaknesses that we identified as a result of the review. The executive director's recommendation report will also provide an overview of the public hearing, and that will also provide an analysis of how we determined community support. Next, closely read through the review committee's report, which will summarize the review committee's evaluation based on the TDOE rubric and the outcome of the capacity interview. So the review committee report will differ from the executive director's report, as it focuses on whether the school has developed a quality academic program. It will discuss whether the school is ready to serve all students, whether the school is likely to meet enrollment projections. Part of the review committee's work is to review the governance structure. We look at the staffing plan, which this year that will be a significant area of review, as well as talking contingency plans, because we are aware of a national teacher shortage. We want to make sure that teachers are licensed and that they have a plan for licensure. And we're also looking at revenue projections and the school's network. So additionally, I would recommend that you listen to or watch the public hearing. While these last approximately 2 hours, listening to the public hearing will provide additional details about the sponsor's application, along with the LEA's reasons for denial and the process they took to come to the decision of denial. You will also hear within the public hearing, you'll hear public comments, which provide us opportunity to hear firsthand from the community whether or not they support the school and the location that they propose to locate in. The public hearing and public comments will be discussed in the executive director's recommendation report as well for your reference.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question at this? In the past, I know we've only had a couple hearings at a time, but some of us prefer to attend when we can the hearings in person. Would there be some way when these dates are set that you could just let us all know? So where we can, we might be able to attend in person.
Absolutely, we will be glad to communicate that. We have already identified some options for each school that we have proposed the public hearing, and we're working with the schools and the districts to confirm those over the coming weeks. And so happy to provide you with that information once confirmed.
Thank you. And I want to just hit pause here for a second, because I think this is important when we talk about protecting the integrity of the process, because as we've gone through several of the appeals, what came out of that was some actions that needed to be taken on the district's part to fix some of their things. And I want to compliment several of the districts right this minute, because they have heard through this process, they have gone in and adjusted, worked with the commission staff, and actually come up with better processes on the local level. So I just want to make sure that we're recognizing that things positively are happening, because it's important for everyone to understand that's why we protect the integrity of the process, because it starts at the local level and comes up, and there's a lot of good things happening. So I just want to make sure that's clear, and that we commend the local districts that have made significant progress in the last couple of months in their process.
Yes, thank you for that comment. I too, as part of watching board meetings and reviewing materials as they come in, I would just applaud our districts that we did see that they had review committees, they held capacity interviews, and really seeing that their process was mirroring a lot of what our process was. And so definitely seeing some.
And Beth, can I just add on that I do want to shout out the State Board of Education in their work as the entity that is conducting authorizer evaluations. They have been putting on what they call a quality authorizing series. And so they have been offering webinars throughout the year to talk about different topics for districts that are not currently authorizers, or may be going through their application process for the first time. And so I did, that was the webinar we did earlier this week, but I do want to shout out the State Board of Education for supporting in this overall vision that all districts are authorizers, whether or not not they have schools or not, they need to be prepared to receive an application and do that work well.
Thank you. Okay, so we will now wrap up today's conversation by speaking about the timeline for your review, and we will bring forward the item that Chair Griscom mentioned as far as the timeline that you receive material. So at this time, the commission plans to hold a special called meeting on October 5th, 2022 to hear the first round of appeals. At this time, it is our intent to have, by September 21st, that we would be emailing you, notifying you that the record is complete and ready for your review. And these files, as we mentioned, there are many files, and so you will need to have access to TN Share in order to access the full record. The record is going to include the notice of appeal, LEA documentation, public hearing materials. This would include the recording of the public hearing, the presentation, and any public comments that were received, and any additional public comment. Within this window, commission staff will still be finalizing the executive director's report and the review committee report, and we expect that those will be prepared by September 28th. And we are still solidifying and working with our applicants to determine fully which meetings which applications will be voted on at each meeting, but we will notify you once we are aware of the specific applications that will be voted on at each meeting.
So Beth, so looking at the dates that Beth has for both October 5 and then for October 17, 18, the first part of it, information for us, is 2 weeks out. The executive director's report is 1 week out. And so I just wanted to flag, because that's why I pulled up my calendar, but a 2 week window before we meet, and then a 1 week before to get the executive director's recommendation. So commissioners, I want you to, that's the amount of time we're talking about, which I think is ample, but I don't want to speak for everybody who's up here. But I think that should give us enough time to review the records that are in here, because we're going to probably have 6 in each one of the sessions. Okay, Beth.
Okay, and I will state that the application and the notice of appeal is posted on our website, and so if anybody is interested in getting a head start on their review, or you want to familiarize yourself with the applications, we do post those upon receipt and confirmation that the appeal is received and complete. So then, similarly to the prior slide, we will be having our quarterly commission meeting on October 17th through 18th. So similar to what we just spoke about, the record would be provided to the commissioners 2 weeks in advance. So by October 3rd is when you can anticipate receiving an email letting you know that the record is complete. And similarly, 1 week prior to the meeting, which would be by October 10th, that is when we anticipate that the executive director's recommendation will be provided to you in TN Share. I would like to thank you for your time. I know that was a lot of information, but at this point I will hand it back to Chair Griscom to facilitate the conversation.
Thank you, Beth, very much. Do commissioners have questions for Beth? Very thorough, thank you. And so we sort of, what I'll call, we've done some trial runs, not that they weren't important decisions, but now we're really hitting the real drive with at least 12 that we know, and maybe more.
Yes.
So thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Beth. So now, Chase, talk to us about what happened to us during the legislative session and what you're working on in anticipation of the next session, please.
Good morning. I'm Chase Ingle, if you don't know me. So the 112th General Assembly wrapped up late April of this year. And what I'm going to talk about today is the changes in the funding formula, as well as some of the items that we worked on that I think you all will see it'll help us in our operations. So we'll start with TISA. The base of that is $6,860 per student. And that's the base funding amount. Now, what was touched on earlier by Commissioner Tucker was the additional weights. And those weights are centered around individual student needs, whether that's characteristics of dyslexia, English learners, or more direct services for special needs students. And that will the aggregate of that is it will add to that additional dollar amount that will be funded for each student as they go into the schools. The third tier, working up my pyramid here, is direct allocations from the state. Some of those direct allocations, for example, are the Charter Schools Facility Fund, and the last piece, which is probably the smallest amount, and it's subject to appropriations year after year, are the outcomes bonuses or incentives, however you want to frame that. Those outcomes are based around things like proficiency in third grade reading, which has been a focal point for the legislature the last few years, and across other subjects and grade levels, if you have students that are on track or mastered, that will generate that outcome bonus. So on July 13th, our general counsel and I and executive director, we submitted our comment to the Department of Education regarding the rulemaking hearing for these. And while you all were driving to town yesterday, they had a very long, robust discussion at a public hearing just up the road at the Department of Ag. And they had a lot of public comments. I need to go back and rewatch it all. And so where TISA is at now is the state board on August 11th will either give it a positive, neutral, or negative recommendation, and we'll keep you updated on how that all pans out. And, so that's where TISA is at right now, and it's a big change, but I think it's important as we are so close to the school year. This will not be implemented until the 23-24 school year. So 22-23 will still be using the BEP formula, but it's been a big topic of conversation, and I wanted to bring it up with you all today. So, more commission-centered items. We're a brand-new agency still in our infancy, and this was the first year we actually had budget hearings with the General Assembly. Tess and I and Melanie, as well as our august chairman, we presented to the Senate Education Committee and the House Finance, Ways and Means Committee, and we received approval from both of those bodies. The biggest item on our budget increase this year was the rent increase, which Chairman Hansen knows a thing or two about. That is $34,500 in recurring dollars, and that was approved by both those bodies. And then, so Ashley really already touched on the LEA policies, but the other item I wanted to let you know about is Public Chapter 918. And this does a handful of things that will help out the commission as we move down this path. So the first thing is on the charter school application, our staff and you all work with it very directly when it comes to these charter school appeals. And now the commission will now be involved in formulating that charter school application. We have hands-on experience with it, and we think we can bring some valuable insight to the table. And excuse me. The second thing, which is a recommendation from NACSA, is the commission now has the ability to delay opening of a charter school by up to 1 year. As we've seen, our timelines can vary year in, year out, and if you all don't think a school is ready to truly serve students, you have that in your toolkit now to where you have the ability to delay that opening. Before, it really rested with the operator, but it gives you guys that choice now. And then the last thing in this bill that is important for us in the work that we do is there's two contracting provisions that we had run into some trouble on. The first one being around the summer camps, the second being around alternative learning centers. And we now have the ability to contract with LEAs to provide those services because you don't want me teaching kids at all. And, you know, being a statewide LEA, it's just not practical for us to provide some of these services across the state. And, you know, I'd updated you all a little bit about this in April when we met, but you all have any questions about that piece of it before I kind of say what I'm doing looking forward?
Not about that. Let me ask something in general. There have been some reports over the last several weeks about things that the legislature considered that didn't get passed, but they've sort of been implied that they did get approved. For example, one that, oh my gosh, in one school district where there aren't even charter schools, we need to sell all of our buildings right now because charter schools can just come in and grab them up. My point being, Well, I appreciate what you've given to us, but can we make sure that we've got, and we may have, so I'm apologize if you're already doing it. On our website, you can see legislation that got passed that affects charter schools. Not all the bills introduced, but the ones that got passed. So that if you really want to know what went on, if you really want to know what changes occurred, here's what happened. And it doesn't prevent somebody who wants to go make something up. But at least there's a knowledge piece there that you could point somebody to. You could report, or you could point a reporter or a school system that may inquire. Here's what actually happened.
Sure.
So is that doable?
I think absolutely, because we actually recently shared a document with our schools so that they were aware of any piece of legislation that was passed that impacted them, that goes above and beyond LEA policy changes, but there are a lot of things that were enacted that they simply now are required to do. So I think we could easily make some adjustments to that report that we share with our charter schools and post that on the website.
Thank you.
That's exactly what I was going to say. We did share that with our schools in a newsletter. The policies that had to be updated, you all have that in the report from that Ashley went to.
Commissioner Richards?
Yes, along that line, I had separately asked Chase to provide information on the requirements regarding the Tennessee Learning Loss Remediation and Student Acceleration Act, which is the requirement that third graders meet certain standards or be retained going forward, and it begins in the 22-23 school year. If it's agreeable with the chair and the group, I think this would be helpful for us to understand how our schools are meeting this requirement, since it involves retaining a significant, third graders, if they don't meet a certain standard. And I'm very concerned we may face some sort of an obligation with our schools to retain a significant number of children. This applies to every school in the state. I know that Shelby County, Memphis Shelby County has implemented a program. I think Davidson County has done so as well, but could we put this on the agenda for October just for a brief update on it? And that way, if we need to take additional efforts, we can be prepared to do that.
I see Tess indicating yes, so we thank you, Commissioner. Chase?
All right. So before we meet again in October, we're going to be very busy, but we will have our sunset hearing in September. So just a little context. A sunset hearing is something that departments and agencies in the state of Tennessee go through all the time. So we have to do this through the legislature so they can ask us questions and make sure we're actually doing what we're charged to do. Our first one was in November of 2020, and we received a 2-year extension on that. And so we're back up in, like I said, September. And, those, they can be extended anywhere from 1 year to 5 years. Fingers crossed, it's not one. But, I look forward to sharing how that went with you all whenever we're back together in October. And the other thing that we'll be back in GovOps concerning is the rule that you voted to approve today, the Charter Schools Appeal Rule. And I'm hoping we get that done by the end of 2022. But as soon as we get a date and we get an outcome, I'll be sure to share it with all the commissioners.
Commissioner Levine?
May I?
Yes.
Yeah, just to, I'm sort of going back to your comments that you made at the beginning of the meeting, Mr. Chair, and which I appreciated and agreed with. I know that you were representing your own views there, but I think it's important to say, I echo what you said, but I would add as well, we're not the policymakers. The legislature is, and the governor is, and they were very thoughtful when they created all this, and there was a reason for it. It was, frankly, what drives each of us. And in our dialogue and discussions we have in open meetings, everything really boils down to what is best for making sure students are learning at least a year's worth of information in a year's worth of time, and that they're prepared to graduate high school, college, or career ready. And that has been what's motivated me in every conversation we've had, every vote we've made. And I think as Chase and Tess go back before the legislature, speaking for myself, I want to say I respect the role that they play as our policymakers. I think they've given us the tools to be effective. And I do hope that they continue to double down on the efforts we're making to make sure that children are given every opportunity in the setting that's best for them, and that's where the conversation is. What's actually best for children, and how do we make sure that they have the ability to reach their aspirations when they finish high school? And so I appreciated your comments, and I was waiting until Chase's report to say this because I knew some of these other issues were going to come up. And I just, that's just my opinion. I'm not speaking for the commission by any stretch there, but just wanted to thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that.
Thank you. Chase?
Happy to take any additional questions you may have.
Anybody else have questions or comments for Chase? Commissioner Tucker?
Is it Tissa or Tisa?
I've got a pretty bad accent, so
I've heard both, and I've heard one from you, so that's my very deep question for you.
So if I could answer that, if you're from the east part of the state, it's Tisa. If you're from everything else, it's Tisa. So
you just said two that both sounded the same to me.
Yeah, that's why I said if you're from the east part of the state. I can't help you there.
Oh, that's a whole different animal.
Commissioner Hanson, you got something to add to this linguistic conversation?
I'm just wondering, could we, the report that Commissioner Richards asked for, would you mind sharing that before October? Because my suspicion is that is going to become a larger and larger issue as we get into the school year and people realize that that's going to be a big ball of wax, ball of yarn, something. So if you don't mind sharing it before then, I would love to read it. Thank you.
absolutely.
Chase, thank you. Drejon, it's time for you. Drejon Cummins, who is very much involved in our strategic plan, and she is going to give us an update. And so, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Good morning. I'm happy to provide some brief updates on our strategic plan. So back in April, Chase and I hosted a webinar where we reviewed the newly adopted strategic plan with our stakeholders, talking through our creation process from start to finish. That webinar is included on our website, along with a copy of our final strategic plan document. We also hosted a productive staff retreat at the end of April, and while at the retreat, we really took some time to dig into our full strategic plan, including a few activities around our core values. One activity that we completed was around our SMART goals, and it was a SMART goal alignment activity. This was an opportunity for staff to align our strategic priorities to our individual SMART goals. As staff, we know that the work that we do each day feeds into our overall progress on the strategic plan, and we were able to codify it in that way. So the next step in our process has been to draft internal benchmarks, and these benchmarks break down the overall strategic priorities and action steps into measurable tasks that can be tracked each month. So staff has collaborated to draft benchmarks through June 2023, and really trying to be mindful of what items to track and measure that support progress towards our priorities. In addition to drafting benchmarks, we've also been in the process of creating a dashboard, which will be the actual tool we use to track progress. You can see here a preview of the dashboard with priority 4 included as an example. So in this screenshot, we have priority 4 included at the top, along with the overall progress to goal for that priority on the top right in blue. Down below that are the benchmarks for that priority. We will review and note the status for our benchmarks, and those will all roll into the overall progress for that priority. Each month, the team will come together to note the benchmark status, and you can see the guide on the top right, and to plan ahead for the next several weeks. The benchmarks and dashboard are still being drafted, but I'd like to give Commissioners Griscom and Cisnet a huge shout out for providing feedback. I'm super excited to dig into Excel formulas to make some tweaks based on their suggestions, but I want to say again, thank you, because it was really helpful. So next steps, once the dashboard and benchmarks are final, include scheduling monthly meetings with the team to begin tracking. So in addition to the work that we do, we'll meet once a month to talk through our benchmarks, really be strategic about what we need to do moving forward. Additionally, we plan to include report outs at our quarterly meetings, and I look forward to sharing with the full commission our first report in October. I'd like to open it up to any questions that anyone may have.
Do commissioners have questions for Drejon? Seeing none, thank you.
Are we worried
Oh.
that Drejan is excited about digging into Excel formulas? Asking for a friend.
Thank you, Trajan.
Thank you.
All right, we are down to our last item for today, an update from Tess. And as you get started, may I ask you to do one thing for us, which is to please introduce our new staff members who've
Yes.
come on since we were last together.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a note. Pam and Trent, right here. So first, we talked a lot about staffing. We are excited about building out the team. We had 2 new staff members join us in the last quarter. We have Trent. Wave Trent. Trent is working on our authorizing team. So he is working with Beth and Maggie closely. We dumped him straight into Microsoft Teams and said, build out all these folders for these 14 appeals. So we're excited that Trent is here. And then we have Pam. Pam is with us and working on our LEA team. She's working with schools on reporting compliance issues. And so she is doing DCS background checks. She is checking teacher licensure. She is getting deep into our reporting calendar. So we are just excited to continue to build out the team.
Thank you. Let me add one thing about Trent, not to put you on the spot, but this is a charter school operator. I mean,
Yeah.
who's been inside of school. So I just wanted to share that with the commissioners that on the stat, and not for all the rest of you who've done great work. But when I learned that yesterday, did not know that. But so we've got somebody here who has seen the things that we're dealing with. So thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Commissioner Smith.
Just before Tess goes on, I think we really need to look at our vetting process for staff. I learned last night at dinner that somehow we led an Alabama alum into this group. I am very concerned.
Oh
We
dear.
have unanimous agreement on that.
Trent
Oh,
was
the-
not ready for this type
No,
of
this is really
introduction.
going down. And so as I turn back, let me thank all of you all, because we as commissioners appreciate the work you do. We know it's going to be, we're adding a lot more to it, which is good. And that we stay very aware, as Commissioner Richards has focused many times, on making sure that you all have the adequate resources and adequate people to keep doing what we're doing. So thank you all. Tess, back to you.
Thank you. As we've talked about, we have 2 scheduled upcoming meetings in October. So we have one on October 5th, and then we have one on October 17th and 18th. I will be communicating to all commissioners regarding logistics for those meetings, so please stay tuned for that. Actually, Drejan will be tracking you down to make sure we know where you are and what seat on the bus you're going to take. And I will also say, for those who are the listening public and stakeholders, our website will have information about the locations for those meetings, how that people can give both in-person comment, as well as we do accept written comment as a part of each meeting. So all of that information will be on our website, and we hope that individuals take advantage of those opportunities. And the final note is just my upcoming annual review is going to lay over sunset hearing and charter school appeals. So similar to what we did last year, I will complete a self-evaluation. You will receive a survey from our general counsel, who will collect feedback individually from you, who will then be filtered through to our chair, who will give me my final evaluation. All state employees' evaluations are due September 30th. We don't have anything going on around September 30th, but I do appreciate y'all's feedback as a part of my development and my leadership for you all. And the full evaluation that the commission chair gives me will be provided to you all as we wrap up this year and look towards next year.
So Tess has now exposed me, because now you'll understand why I wanted 2 weeks or more for all these hearings.
And Chair, that is all I have.
Thank you. Any questions for Tess? Commissioner Woodson.
I actually don't, well, I do have a question. I'll get to it, but I'm going to wind up first. Tess, and I'm confident that this is shared across this commission. I am continuously so impressed with the team that you have built and are building. I've had the privilege of working in public service for a very long time. I've had just so many faces come to mind of exceptional folks who say, yes, I'll come and serve in government. This team across the board, every presentation that we've had represents such thoughtfulness, such complex work that you all are synthesizing and sharing with us and with the public. And it's always with consistent values that we hold as a commission and a mission for this organization. And I just want to thank you for your leadership, and to each one of the team members who are here and those who aren't here, excellence. I mean, just values-driven, student-centered, thoughtful excellence, and I deeply appreciate it. So here's the question.
Yes.
Long wind-up, apologies. To the extent that you go through your evaluation process and there are things that we can do to be supportive of you, whether that's obviously we have lots of processes, budget, otherwise capacity, but as you think about your own growth and development as an executive leader, I hope that you will feel empowered to share that with the chair and the leadership of the commission, because we want to do everything we can to support you in your growth path. And I just appreciate your leadership very much. This is a big gift to the state of Tennessee that you lean in so heavy, and each member of your team does the same. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, before I get a motion to adjourn, our next meeting is scheduled for October 5, and then we have a regular quarterly meeting on the 18th of October. And as you know from today's discussions, we got a lot of work that's coming before us, and we're just get ourselves ready and ready to go forward. So, yes, Tess.
You reminded me, Chair, that given the volume that we anticipate for October 17th and 18th, we do plan to handle some full commission business the afternoon of the 17th, and then primarily handle exclusively appeals on the 18th. So we will do some committee work early in the afternoon, take a brief break, have a start some business, and then recess to the next morning. So I appreciate that reminder, because I wanted to get everyone's head in the right mindset.
And thank you for reminding me, Commissioner Smith. Yes.
And I know we may already do this, but just because of the sheer number of potential appeals, in the share, as you all receive written statements that they want in the record, can we upload those there so that, because honestly, that could take a long time to read, and having those ahead of time would be helpful, that we could just quickly add them into the record that we've been able to review.
Absolutely, we will do so.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? So let me thank all commissioners for your time and attention and contributions to this meeting. Anybody else have any comments to make? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? There we go. We're good to go. Thank you.